Listen very carefully because what I'm about to tell you is something most Americans have not heard yet. Hello, guys. I'm a new dual benefit option offering two separate monthly payments of either $1,200 or $1,800 is now being quietly reviewed inside the Social Security Administration and the Office of Retirement Policy. And if this moves forward, it could reshape what SSI and SSDI recipients receive in the months and years ahead. For many people, this will feel like it came out of nowhere. One day, everything seemed the same. The next day, whispers started circulating about a model that splits benefits into two tiers. A lower tier around $1,200 for a foundational level of support, and a higher tier around $1,800 for people meeting newer eligibility markers that experts say are long overdue. At first, it sounded like another rumor, but then something changed. Earlier this week, internal briefing notes were shared with a small policy group mentioning what they called a two-tier supplemental structure. That phrase alone was enough to raise eyebrows because this is not routine language. This is not used in everyday SSA documents. This is language used when analysts are studying significant benefit shifts that would affect millions of people. And the fact that it appeared now in the middle of ongoing concerns about affordability, inflation, and stagnant disability checks means something more serious is happening. Let me put this into simple words. When Social Security officials begin modeling two new payment options, they're not doing it for fun. They're doing it because lawmakers asked for new solutions to help people with the lowest benefits, especially SSI and long-term SSDI beneficiaries who have been stuck behind inflation for years. And now, with cost of living adjustments falling short and food, housing, and medical costs still rising, the pressure is reaching a point where the old formulas simply don't work anymore. The truth is, this dual benefit idea didn't appear out of thin air. Earlier this year, a bipartisan policy review group quietly told both the SSA and the Congressional Budget Office to begin exploring alternatives to the current benefit structure. They wanted to know whether a split-tier system could provide more stability for people who have been living at or below the poverty line for far too long. And that's why this $1,200 or $1,800 concept is suddenly gaining traction. But here's the part I want you to pay close attention to. This is not just a simple increase. This is not a standard cost of living adjustment. This is a structural shift, a new framework, a redesigned approach to how disability and low-income benefits could be paid going forward. And anytime you hear words like review, modeling, or structural shift inside Social Security, you should take it seriously because those words almost always signal that bigger decisions are coming. Right now, everything is still in the review phase, but every indication shows that the discussions are more active than anyone expected. Analysts are studying affordability. Budget teams are studying long-term costs. Policy leaders are preparing early reports. And the key question, the one everyone is waiting to answer, is this: who qualifies for the 2200? Who qualifies for the 1800? And how would this affect current SSI and SSDI recipients? That question is why this moment matters so much. Because if the review moves into the modeling phase, which is expected soon, it means the idea is strong enough to build projections for. And once projections exist, lawmakers can begin debating the plan publicly. And once that happens, everything changes. Before we go any further, remember this. Nothing is final, nothing is approved, but the fact that this idea is even on the table, the fact that internal documents mention two separate payment levels, tells us exactly where the conversation is heading. People on SSI, people on SSDI, people on low fixed incomes, people who have been overlooked by cost of living adjustments that barely move the needle. This entire group is finally getting attention. Now stay with me because we're going to break down what this dual benefit review actually means, how the $1,200 and $1,800 tiers would be structured, and why experts are saying this could be one of the most significant changes to disability benefits in more than 20 years. And trust me, what you're about to hear next will surprise you. Now let's break this down in a way that makes complete sense, because the phrase dual benefit review can sound confusing if you're hearing it for the first time. What exactly are they studying? Why are there two payment levels? And why would Social Security even consider changing the entire structure of SSI and SSDI benefits after decades of using the same system? Here's the truth. The review is centered around one core idea, creating a two-option model that gives low-income and disabled Americans more stability while also reducing gaps created by outdated formulas. These formulas were designed decades ago for a completely different economic environment. Today, everything costs more. Today, benefits that once covered basic needs no longer stretch far enough. So, the system is being challenged to adapt. The first option being reviewed is what analysts call the baseline tier. This is the $1,200 level. It's meant to replace or supplement existing SSI or SSDI benefits for people whose current payments fall far below what experts consider a livable baseline. In early conversations, this $1,200 amount is being used as a reference point, meaning it could shift slightly depending on the final modeling, but the purpose is clear. This tier is designed for individuals whose income has remained flat for years due to fixed benefit levels and limited adjustments. The second option is the enhanced tier. This is where the $1,800 figure comes in. Think of this tier as a recognition of long-term disability, extreme hardship, or lifetime low earnings that create severe financial vulnerability. Under this model, the enhanced tier would be available to people who meet updated eligibility markers that reflect today's economic realities rather than outdated criteria from decades ago. These markers could include the duration of a disability, the absence of work credits due to conditions that began at childhood, or proof of long-term income instability. What makes this review so important is that it doesn't simply raise benefits, it reorganizes them. It gives the government a way to assign more accurate support levels based on real needs, not outdated calculations. And this is exactly why the Congressional Budget Office and a bipartisan subcommittee requested what they called a cost-neutral modeling update. They want to know whether this dual-tier model can be structured in a way that doesn't explode long-term government spending. And this is where things get interesting. Early discussions indicate that the dual benefit system could actually reduce administrative costs and eliminate overlapping program inefficiencies. Right now, the SSI and SSDI systems operate under separate rules, separate calculations, and separate administrative processes. This creates duplication, it creates delays, it creates gaps. A dual benefit model would simplify these layers by creating a more unified structure, especially for people who currently receive both SSI and SSDI at the same time. But before you get too excited, you need to understand something. This is still a review. It is not approval. Analysts are not writing checks. They're studying the data, building projections, and determining whether the two-tier system is financially and legally possible. Every major change goes through this process. It's not fast, it's not flashy, but it is the first step toward any major shift that affects tens of millions of Americans. Now, here's the part nobody expected. According to one person familiar with the review, the early numbers surprised analysts. They assumed the $1,800 tier would be too expensive to maintain. But when they compared it to the rising costs of poverty programs, emergency assistance programs, and Medicaid costs linked to financial hardship, the model showed that strengthening Social Security benefits might actually lower costs in other areas. In other words, reducing poverty inside Social Security programs could reduce spending outside of them. Think about that for a moment. If higher disability or SSI checks help people keep up with rent, food, and utilities, then fewer people fall into crisis situations that require emergency support. And that is why this review is happening now. Not because someone wanted to be generous, but because the numbers finally show that the current system is too expensive in different ways, and strengthening benefits may be the more cost-effective solution. Another major element in this review is the question of long-term feasibility. A dual-tier system requires consistent funding, updated eligibility tools, and clear guidance for millions of Americans. This means the SSA's internal systems, from payment calculations to appeals processes, would require updates, and those updates come with challenges. But here's what surprised many observers. The review notes suggest the SSA has already begun testing new digital tools for faster eligibility verification. This implies they are preparing for bigger changes ahead, even if they haven't been approved yet. So what does all this mean for you? It means the conversation is shifting. It means lawmakers and analysts are now looking at benefit systems through a new lens. It means that instead of continuing to adjust benefits by tiny cost of living percentages, leaders are finally asking whether the entire structure needs to be modernized. And yes, the dual benefit model is still a long way from becoming real, but the fact that it's being reviewed this seriously means one thing. The system is under pressure to change, and leaders are now forced to look for solutions that go beyond temporary fixes. Now, we're going to look at something that matters even more. Who would actually qualify for these payments? How would eligibility be determined? And how much money could you realistically receive under each tier? And what you're about to hear next may change the way you look at your own benefits. Let's talk about the groups that would be directly affected. The early review documents point to 4 major categories: SSI recipients, SSDI beneficiaries, people who currently receive both at the same time, and low-income seniors who fall into coverage gaps that the system has never properly addressed. These are the individuals who would be first in line for the baseline or enhanced tier. For SSI recipients, the baseline $1,200 tier could replace the outdated federal SSI maximum, which has not kept pace with inflation for decades. Many SSI recipients are still receiving checks around $700 to $800 a month. That amount might have worked 40 years ago, but it barely covers a week of expenses today. The dual benefit model is meant to correct that imbalance by pulling those individuals into a standard baseline that reflects today's cost of living, not the cost of living in the 1970s. For SSDI recipients, qualification would depend on both work history and disability duration. Right now, many SSDI beneficiaries receive payments ranging from $800 to $1,200 a month, and these numbers vary widely based on lifetime earnings. The review suggests the enhanced tier, the $1,800 option, would be designed to support people whose disability has lasted many years, who rely entirely on their benefits, or whose earnings were permanently limited by medical conditions that began early in life. And here's something important. The review team is considering whether people with long-term disabilities that began before age 22 should automatically be evaluated for the higher tier. This would apply to adult disabled children, individuals with lifelong conditions, and people whose medical limitations prevented them from ever building a strong work history. For these individuals, the $1,800 tier could be the new standard. Now let's talk about concurrent beneficiaries, people who receive both SSI and SSDI at the same time. These individuals are among the most financially vulnerable. Their SSDI checks are typically very low due to limited work history, and SSI fills in the rest. But the combined total still leaves most people below the poverty line. The dual benefit model could simplify this by giving concurrent beneficiaries a single benefit level instead of stacking 2 small checks. And early modeling suggests many of these individuals could qualify for the enhanced $1,800 tier because their circumstances fall directly into the high hardship category. But the most interesting part of this entire review is the eligibility markers. These markers determine who falls into the 1200 tier and who qualifies for the 18 through 800 tier based on the information leaked from early discussions. Here are the markers being studied. The first marker is disability duration. The longer you've been disabled, the more likely you would qualify for the enhanced tier. Analysts believe people who have been disabled for 5 years or longer may require more support simply because the financial impact grows over time. The second marker is lifetime earnings. Individuals with very low average index monthly earnings, the number the SSA uses to calculate SSDI, could automatically qualify for the higher tier. These are individuals whose earnings were limited not by choice, but by disability or lifelong medical conditions. The third marker is 0 earnings years. If someone has 10 or more years in their work record with no earnings due to disability, early onset conditions, or major medical limitations, they may qualify for the enhanced tier. This is one of the clearest signs of long-term financial vulnerability. The fourth marker is hardship indicators. These include documented extreme poverty, long-term reliance on SSI, limited family support, or severe medical needs that raise monthly expenses. The review suggests a hardship indicator system may be created to help identify who needs the enhanced tier most. Now, let's talk money. If you're currently on SSI and receiving around $700 to $800 a month, the baseline tier alone would increase your monthly support by hundreds of dollars. If you're receiving SSDI and your payment is below $1,200, the baseline tier could pull you upward. But if your disability is long-term or you meet the hardship markers, the enhanced tier could lift you into the $1,800 range. Let me give you a few realistic examples using the same formulas the SSA uses today. These aren't guarantees. They're illustrations that help make the concept real. Imagine someone currently receiving $880 in SSDI due to a limited work history and early onset disability. Under the baseline tier, they could be raised to $1,200. But if they meet the enhanced criteria, especially if their disability began before age 22, they could be elevated to $1,800. Now imagine an SSI recipient living alone with no outside income, currently receiving around $800 a month. Under the baseline tier, their payment could jump to $1,200. But if they have documented hardship conditions or long-term medical expenses, the enhanced tier could apply. Next, consider someone with a mixed record, a concurrent beneficiary receiving $500 in SSDI and $250 in SSI. Today, their combined total is still incredibly low. Under the dual benefit model, they would not stay split. Their payments would be streamlined into the most appropriate tier. And because people in this category often meet multiple hardship and long-term disability markers, many could qualify for the enhanced $1,800 option. But here's something that hasn't been talked about publicly. The review team is exploring whether the enhanced tier could operate almost like a supplemental top-up, meaning someone currently receiving $1,400 in SSDI could be topped up to $1,800 if they meet specific criteria. This shows how flexible the model could become if it moves forward. The biggest question many people have is whether the dual benefit system would replace existing benefits or simply supplement them. Based on the early language in the review notes, the most likely outcome is a replacement model, not a supplement. But the final decision will depend on economic scoring and congressional negotiations. What we know for sure is that the intent is to reduce poverty among people with disabilities, not increase administrative complexity, and this is why the dual benefit concept is gaining support. Because for millions of Americans living on fixed incomes that simply do not rise with real-world costs, even the baseline $1,200 option would be life-changing. And the enhanced $1,800 tier could dramatically reduce the financial pressure on people who have been struggling for years. Here's what happens next. The dual benefit idea now moves deeper into the review phase. Analysts will run financial models, compare cost projections, and prepare a short report for lawmakers. If that report shows the system is workable, the proposal could move into public discussion as early as next year's budget cycle. Nothing is guaranteed, but the momentum is real. The next 90 days are important. That's when the SSA, the Congressional Budget Office, and a small bipartisan subcommittee will decide whether this concept should move forward. If it does, the $1,200 and $1,800 tiers will be shaped into clearer eligibility rules that millions of SSI and SSDI recipients will want to follow closely. But be careful. Anytime big numbers like this start circulating, scammers rush in. No one is being approved today. No one is being asked to pay fees. No one should click links promising instant enrollment. This is a review, not a payout. For now, stay informed. The system is changing because people like you have pushed for fairness, dignity, and real support. And no matter what comes next, you deserve clear information and updates you can trust. Make sure you subscribe, stay alert, and check back for the latest developments.